You are not under arrest, right? You are not in custody. You are free to leave, so just want to make sure we are clear on that. I appreciate you coming in. I can imagine that you were probably getting tired of telling the story over and over and over again, but I would kind of like to start when you first met Michelle because I know there is a lot of history there. This is Mark Castellano, currently being interrogated at the Houston Police Department for the missing case of Michelle Warner, his ex-girlfriend. Michelle met Mark when they both worked for the same medical firm in 2008. Michelle, who was already a single mother, had her second child with Mark a year after they met. Just a few months after Kadan was born, Mark ended the relationship. When she found permanent employment at a law firm in 2012, she decided to ask Mark if he would agree to an arrangement. The arrangement involved her and Caden moving in with him, and Mark could help raise his son. They would live together, but not as a couple, just as Caden's parents. He agreed. That day, the 24th of September, Michelle never arrived at work, and her employer contacted her several times, but their calls went unanswered. That same day, Michelle's ex-husband contacted her brother, Dave Chiffon, to let him know that Michelle did not collect her daughter. David called Michelle, and when he got no answer, he called Mark. Mark informed David that on the night of Saturday, September 22nd, he had an argument with Michelle, which led to her leaving. What concerned Mark even more was the fact that Michelle did not take her car and, most worryingly, left behind their child, Caden. Mark confessed to David that he had no knowledge of Michelle's whereabouts. As a result, Michelle was officially reported missing, prompting the police to conduct a welfare check on Tuesday, September 25th. Unfortunately, Michelle was not found at her apartment. During the inspection, the authorities noticed the absence of hard drives from the computers, but no evidence indicated that Michelle had suffered any harm. Detectives noticed that Mark left a note for Michelle on the mirror in the bathroom which read, "Caden and I are gone. You can have the apartment all to yourself. I'm taking the car since you can't pay it, and I now owe my dad $3,000 because of you. Get it refinanced through your rich daddy and get my name off it. You are welcome to see Caden, but since you are on a drug-filled weekend, I guess you won't call since Grandma called and said you turned your phone off. I will get you drug tested this time." Back in the interrogation room, Mark begins by describing Michelle in a negative way. When she gets mad, she's violent. She'll hit you. She thinks she has the right to. The way she'll sit there and tell you where she's raised, you know, man has to take up crap. She's a pretty girl and she gets everything she wants. She has a princess attitude. The detective asks if she is using any kind of drugs at that time that he is aware of, or if she has introduced that into the relationship yet. Mark lists Adderall for ADHD and hydrocodone. He explains that she, getting to know him, said, "Well, you were in a car accident. You could go get some for me." He says it got pretty bad for a great while with the pill demand. Work is starting to notice that he is changing, as she is having him do a lot of things, like taking an extra computer from the company for her brother or getting her other things. The detective clarifies that she is basically asking him to steal now, to which Mark replies, "Yes, sir." He admits he did it, stating, "Well, you're invested in this relationship, right? She pretty much at this point owns me." Mark has crafted a detailed facade portraying himself as the helpless victim in this relationship. Despite the detective's doubts about Mark's stories, it is necessary to pretend sympathy and compassion during the interview. It is the only way the detective can hope to get a confession from him. The detective asks to get to last Saturday, the 22nd. Mark describes that as soon as he opened the door, it was like a battle zone. The first thing she says is about their son getting into sugar and dumping it everywhere, blaming Mark for leaving it out. She goes on and on. Mark says he said something about her taking too many pills and not being able to watch Caden. She retorts and just walks up to him and hits him. The detective asks for details on where they were and what happened. Mark explains he was in the living room by the computer desk, picking up stuff, when she came up close and swung her arm. He put his head down and she hit him underneath. He says it was not hard and that he is used to it at this point. She walks out, slams the door into a room, and about 10-15 minutes later, he opens the door to talk and finds their son hiding in his room, scared from Michelle's screaming. Mark recounts a time she cursed at their son, getting in his face, shaking his little hand, and yelling that he was going to turn out to be a sorry piece of crap like his daddy. At that point, Mark says he came over and pushed her, telling her not to do that anymore. With a foundation of trust established, the detective has successfully put Mark at ease, eliminating any sense of threat. Now the detective switches tactics, directly accusing Mark of harming Michelle, but framing it in a way that justifies Mark's actions as protecting his son. This approach makes it easier for Mark to confess to the murder, as he believes he was doing the right thing rather than acting out of evil or selfish motives. The detective says his heart goes out to Mark for what he has put up with for 3 years of his little boy's life. He says he understands his feelings about his son, stating he has a son himself. He says this is about Caden. He states that whatever did happen in the apartment between him and Michelle that resulted in her disappearing was not about him wanting to hurt Michelle, but about his love for Caden and protecting him because he was not being taken care of. Mark agrees. Exactly. The detective has skillfully employed a psychological technique known as the good choice, bad choice method. This method presents Mark with only 2 options, forcing him to make a decision. On one hand, there is a good choice, his unwavering love for his son Caden. On the other hand, there is the bad choice, harboring ill intentions towards Michelle. Mark is inclined to favor and gravitate towards one narrative, typically the one that paints him in the most innocent light. This technique exploits Mark's natural inclination to protect his innocence and amplifies the chances of him aligning with the desired narrative. The detective continues saying that whatever happened between him and Michelle in the course of her cursing at him, slapping him in the face, hitting him while he was on his knees on the ground, picking up stuff that she directed him to do, was just the straw that broke the camel's back. He says Mark was now in protective mode for Caden. This was not happening anymore. Michelle was not going to harm his son anymore, either emotionally or physically or verbally or in any way, shape, or form, and he was going to have to resolve the problem. He tells Mark this is the opportunity to talk about all those things because he has already laid the groundwork for what happened in that apartment, and the detective is on board with him. He says this is not about trying to make Mark look like a bad guy, and that listening to his story, he almost wants to cry for him, unable to imagine the stress and pressure put on him because of the love he has for Caden, watching this woman continually berate him and treat him terribly. Mark is now in a situation where he feels cornered. He has 2 choices: confess or stop talking and ask for a lawyer. The detective says they both know Michelle did not walk out of that apartment. They both know the circumstances under which whatever did happen happened. He says he is not wanting Mark to explain that he wanted to hurt Michelle, but to explain what he felt like he had to do to protect Caden. He asks Mark to be honest and tell him what happened. Mark confesses. I got up and she's getting dressed and she's finishing up and she's still yelling and Caden's hiding. I grabbed her and I broke her neck. He says she told him he was sorry and that she was going to control him the rest of his life. He grabbed her by her neck and threw her on the bed. He heard it pop, and then her tongue popped out, and that was it. He says he sat there and held it, and by the time he realized what he did, she was dead. He says, "Look at me. I'm sorry. Give me the death penalty. That's fine. Look, I deserve it, Mark." The detective responds, "Look, I'm proud of you. Life is over with." Mark says, Your life's not over with, Mark." The detective asks him to show him in the room where she was, pointing out the bed, the closet, the door going outside. Mark demonstrates, saying he walked in, and that is when he grabbed her and threw her on the bed, right there. The detective says he knows this is painful, but he wanted him to demonstrate what happened. Mark says, "I push her and then grab her and then fall down on the phone?" The detective assures him he is not going to do it because he has his brother there to help him out. Mark then describes that when she fell down, he heard that, and then her tongue stuck out. Police obtained surveillance footage from outside the apartment complex. Mark was seen on the footage in the early hours of Monday morning, the 24th of September. At 3:21 a.m., Mark dragged a large container to Michelle's car. He made several trips back and forth to the car at 5:41 a.m. and then left at 6 a.m. Police searched the area around Mark's parents' home and found a number of items in a dumpster. They found a Pampers box, Mark's business card, sunglasses, Michelle's credit card, which had been cut up, and clothing, as well as a wad of black tape. During Mark's sentencing phase, his lawyer argued that his case was one of sudden passion. Sudden passion can be raised as a mitigating factor during the punishment phase of the trial in Texas. It cannot be used as a defense to murder. Jurors had to decide whether Mark was provoked to such a level of fear, rage, or resentment that any reasonable person in a similar situation with an ordinary temper simply would not be able to keep their cool. If Mark was successful in this argument, it would mean that the maximum punishment for murder is reduced from life in prison to 20 years, and he could be sentenced to as little as 2 years. The jury did not find Mark's case was a case of sudden passion. He was sentenced to 27 years. He will be eligible for parole in 2026.